Hey guys, in today's video, we will look at the Ruby REPL. Okay, so yesterday we touched on it a little, but today we'll try to take a deeper look at it and see how this helps us experiment with Ruby faster and learn Ruby faster. Okay, so when you install Ruby, you get something called IRB, which is short for Interactive Ruby. But you could also install, you could run this gem install pry, which is a more modern REPL. Okay, and like we said yesterday, REPL stands for read, evaluate, print. Right, so read, evaluate, print, loop. Okay, so it reads what you type, it evaluates it, which means it understands that Ruby executes the code, and it prints whatever's the output of that, and then it loops back to reading. So that's the REPL, right? So if I say 5 plus 5, it executes this code, prints the output of that, 5 plus 5, the result of that, and that would be 10, and then waits for your input again, right? So that's the REPL. Okay, so in Ruby, as you can see, you can add numbers, you can multiply numbers, and you can subtract numbers, divide numbers. 5 by 2. This is a little odd, right? 5 by 2. How the heck is that 2? It's because we're using integers, and the closest integer to 5 by 2 is 2. Now, if you use floats like that, that's going to be 2.5. But sometimes it's, let's say 1 by 3 is 0.3333, right? So this is called floats, floating point numbers. Like, they have decimals in them. They're not. So there's different types, but for now, let's just say it's a float, okay? And how can we know it's a float? We've got to look at the class, and it's a float, okay? So float is like a very odd name for a number with decimals in it, right? So this is called a floating point arithmetic, and there's a standard for it. But for now, just assume anything with decimals is a float. There's also things called decimals, which is like a type. And floating point should not be used for calculating money, playing around with money, because it's not accurate. But anyway, let's just not talk about all that now, right? So you got a float, you use float to divide numbers and whatnot, you get a more accurate number instead of an integer. You can add strings, test, hello, right? When you add two strings, you get a concatenation of that. Okay, it's called concatenation, right? So you've got strings, and if you have a string, you can use a function which is actually a method on the string called upcase. And just guess what it's going to do. It's going to turn that string into an uppercased version of it, okay? Now, we're calling these methods, right? So we said there's functions and there's methods, right? Now, a method is something that you call on an object, okay? Or like for now, let's just say variable, right? We haven't talked about objects, but in Ruby, anything is an object, okay? And again, don't try to understand too much about this, but x is 1, x is an object, okay? Y is foo, y is an object, okay? Y is 3.0, that's an object, okay? Now, we said these are all these are data, and they have types, right? So when we say y is foo, the type of y, we said, is string, right? Now, a string has some built-in functions on it, and those are called methods, okay? Now, if you want to look at all the methods on y, which is a string, you can do in pry, you can do lsy, okay? And this says, oh, these are all the methods that are available on Y. And we saw upcase. Um, we can, what else can we do here? Length, right? So it has 3 characters, so that's the length. And then you have down case, you have case compare. There's like so many functions here, right? So you've got count, which is also probably going to give us 3. No, it doesn't. It says, okay, so maybe we say y dot count. We want to count all the instances of O. That's a 0. O. We have 2 O's in it, right? So y is foo, and it has 2 zeros in it, right? So these are all the methods available on a string object, okay? And the way you call a method is always you have the object, right? So you have the object and then a dot and then the method name, okay? And then it could also have arguments, okay? There's no space when you call them, but just for demonstration, I showed the space. But here you can see y dot count is like count is the name of the method, and it takes 1 argument, which is I want to count these character, like this character, see how many times it appears in the string, right? So let's say hello there banana, right? And let's say this is x, okay? And then I want to count the number of a's in it. That's 3. The number of e's in it. Oh, that's 3 too. The number of x's in it. It's 0. So count is a method on a string, and it takes 1 argument, which is the character you want to count in that string, and it gives you a number, which is the number of times that character appears in that string, right? So this is a method on a string. Now, you have integers too, right? So if we say x is 3, we can look at all the methods on x, on an integer, right? And it says there's these methods, there's these methods, there's div, there's even, there's odd. And you see, like, this is interesting. So there's a method named even question mark. There's a method named odd question mark. So Ruby also has functions which end in a question mark. And usually when they end in a question mark, the convention is, it's like a question, right? Is today a Tuesday? So usually for those kinds of questions, the answer is either yes or a no. And in programming, that would be a Boolean, which means it's a true or a false. So by convention, a function that ends in a question mark returns a true or false, right? So we can say, well, x is 3. Want to see, is x odd? It's going to be true because x is odd, right? And if you try to check if x is even, then it's probably going to be false. And yeah, it's going to be false, right? Now, we've seen x is 5 and x is even, right? So we've done that. But you don't even have to assign it to a variable to call the methods, okay? You can say 5.even, okay? Or string, hello dot upcase, because, well, what is that? Upcase, right? So hello, the string literal is a string, and that has a method called upcase on it, right? Which returns a string, okay? Now let's say we assign this to y, okay? Now we can say y dot downcase, yeah? So that gives us hello, right? We can assign that to z, right? And then we can say z dot length, which is 5, because it has 5 characters. Now we can assign that to a, right? And then I'll say a is even. It says false, right? And so on, right? So you can see how we can call methods on objects. Now, another interesting thing is when you call hello.upcase, it returns a string, right? And then we're calling .downcase on it. Again, you don't have to assign this to a variable to be able to call this. So you could say hello.upcase.downcase.upcase.length, right? So what's going to happen here? So hello is going to be uppercased, and that will be the result of this. And then it's like that's a string, right? So this returns a string, which is all uppercased. And then we're calling dot downcase on that string. So that's going to return all lowercased. And that's a string. And now that's going to return all lowercased, and then we're calling dot uppercase on that. So that's going to return hello all uppercased. And then which is also a string. And then we're calling dot length on that, which is going to compute the length of the uppercase string hello, which is going to be 5. So the output of that is going to be 5, right? So we'll see it's 5, and it's legal Ruby code. This is not wrong. And then we can say, is that even? Because that's the output there at that point is an integer. It says false, which is good. Now we can look at all the functions available, all the methods available on false. So there's a function called toS, which is short for toString. So now we can call toS on that, and now that gives a string. And then you can call dot uppercase on that, which gives false, right? So you can keep doing this, right? This is called, you're just chaining methods on the return values, right? And that's okay. That's perfectly normal Ruby code. And that's what that means, okay? So when you're reading code, you'll probably run into cases like these. You're like, what the heck is going on here, okay? So read it like bit by bit, okay? So hello, that's just a string literal hello. And dot uppercase, you can call dot uppercase on a string. That's going to give you an uppercased hello string. Dot downcase, that's going to give you something else, and so on and on and on and on. As long as you're calling methods available on the return values, it's okay. So for instance, this returns a string, which has a method called uppercase, which returns a string, which has a method called downcase, which returns a string, which has a method called uppercase, which returns a string, which has a method called length, which gives you the length of the string, which returns an integer. Now, you can't call length dot uppercase, okay? So if you do that, it's gonna complain, right? Because length returns an integer, right? And if I say dot uppercase, it says undefined method uppercase for an instance of integer. So integers don't have uppercase on them, right? So that's what you got to take care of, right? Make sure you're calling methods that are available on the returned type, okay? And also don't chain too much, okay? Maybe chain like 1, 2 levels, 1, 2 dots. There's actually a law of Demeter which says don't use too many dots, okay? But anyway, hopefully that taught you something. Like, try to use pry, play around with like lots of the available commands, right? You could do puts, you could do like addition, subtraction, absolute values, modulo. Look at all the operators available in Ruby. Try to play around, have fun, and use pry. Okay, it's a very cool tool, and it also has like a few other things. It has is it has so this doesn't have this doesn't have a pry.doc, but if you install it properly, you can also read documentation, look at the code. It's a very cool tool. Okay, so install it, check it out, and yeah, have fun.